to run the new Alberta.
They would beg to negotiate a new deal.
The system could not be fixed.
Responsibility isn't something you outsource.
Alberta could be the new America.
And next to the stage is the founder and president of the Alberta Institute, an independent public policy think tank that aims to advance personal freedom and choice in Alberta. Please welcome to the stage, Peter McCaffrey.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Peter McCaffrey, and I'm the president of the Alberta Institute. We're an independent libertarian research and advocacy organization that works to develop and promote practical solutions to a whole range of public policy problems, from municipal to provincial and federal, especially when it affects Alberta. And given the nature of the event tonight, I should remind everybody that we're also a non-partisan organization, which in practical terms means that if the NDP want me to come and give this speech to their conference, I would also be happy to do that, although I'm guessing they might need someone to teach them some economics first. Now, in case you haven't worked it out yet from my accent, I'm not originally from Alberta. I was born in the UK, mostly grew up in New Zealand, and then moved to Canada in 2012, first to Saskatchewan to work for a think tank there, and then to Calgary in 2014 to work with Preston Manning at the Manning Centre. And then I founded the Alberta Institute in 2018. And some of you may be familiar with the Alberta Institute already, but if you aren't, I think it would be fair to say that we're now the largest think tank that is focused exclusively on Alberta issues, based right here in Calgary. Even if you aren't familiar with the Alberta Institute itself, you might be familiar with some of our other projects that we work on, things like Common Sense Calgary on municipal issues, Project Confederation, and also the Free Alberta Strategy, through which we wrote and advocated for the Alberta Sovereignty Act before Danielle Smith picked it up and campaigned on it in the UCP leadership race and subsequently in the 2023 election. And that brings me nicely to what I want to mostly focus on in my talk here, which I think is a slightly different way of thinking about the issue that we're here to discuss, and that I've been contemplating on for a while. And that contemplation actually goes back a number of years. Many of you here may know Professor Barry Cooper, political scientist at the University of Calgary, one of the famous Calgary School professors, and he was actually also one of the three authors who wrote the Free Alberta Strategy that we published. Anyway, I've been lucky enough to benefit from Dr. Cooper's expertise on Western political philosophy on many occasions. But one particular idea that he talked to me about once kind of stuck in my mind, and it keeps coming back and becoming relevant more and more. And I probably won't give it the justification that it deserves, and I'm sure Barry could explain it better than I'm going to now. But roughly speaking, the idea that he communicated was that if anyone ever says to you that they would never, ever support separation, even in an extreme situation where the relationship between Canada and Alberta is far worse than it is right now, then they're not being rational. But equally, if there's no possible kind of relationship between Canada and Alberta, no matter how implausible, that could make you support wanting to Alberta to stay in Confederation, then you're also being irrational. Now, before those of you who've already made up your mind to leave kind of boo me off the stage, let me explain a little bit more in detail what I mean. I want you to imagine a line all the way across this stage, all the way from one end to the other. It's not a political spectrum, it's not left to right, it's just a line representing every possible version of Alberta's place in Confederation. So, on one end of that line would be total federal control. A world where Ottawa governs Alberta entirely, where Alberta has no seats in Parliament, no say in the Senate, no judges on the Supreme Court, no ability to decide what happens in our own backyard. Almost every tax dollar goes east, not just the very large amount that goes east now. And, we could make up all sorts of other things. The Alberta legislature can't pass any law unless it's approved by the federal parliament, or whatever you want to come up with. And then on the other end of the line, imagine Alberta as an imperial power. Imagine if we got to elect every MP. Not just the Alberta MPs, but all the other MPs in all the other provinces as well. Imagine we appoint every justice of the Supreme Court. We decide Quebec's language laws and Ontario's carbon taxes. Red Deer's the new national capital. Sorry for those of you who live in Red Deer. Money's now going to flow from Quebec to the west. Only electricity generated from oil and gas is allowed. No solar, no wind. That's all banned. Rodeo's the new national support. Every province must build 3 pipelines a month, and you're only allowed to eat pancakes for breakfast. Now, of course, those are extremes. They're silly examples. They'd never happen, and no one really even wants that. But imagine them as setting the outer bounds of this line. And then as we start to move inwards, things get more and more plausible, more and more possible. So if we were maybe here, a little bit in, maybe Alberta gets a guaranteed number of seats on the Supreme Court. Maybe we got bonus seats in the Senate and the House of Commons. Maybe we get vetoes on infrastructure projects in the East. That starts to sound a bit unfair to the East, right? But, I mean, those are the sorts of things that happen right now, only the other way around. Because somewhere around here is where we are right now. Quebec gets guaranteed seats on the Supreme Court. In fact, it's guaranteed in the Constitution. It's not just law. The concept of equalization, if not the formula, is entrenched in the Constitution. In the House of Commons, Quebec and the Atlantic provinces get bonus seats. I won't go through the full list of inequalities because you probably know many of them, and some of the speakers tonight have covered them too. But suffice to say that Confederation isn't fair. We're not here in the middle. We're somewhere over there in this example. And as outraged as Quebec and the East would be if the situation was somewhere here, that's how outraged we should be about it being down there. But that brings us to the question of what does Alberta actually want? Or for those of you who've already given up, what did you used to want for Alberta? I think we want fairness. We want to be an equal partner in Confederation, not a junior one. We don't want more than other provinces, we just want the same. We don't want to be over here telling other provinces what to do. We just want them to stop telling us what to do. And that brings us to the efforts of the UCP since they got elected in 2019. First under Jason Kenney with the Fair Deal panel and the equalisation referendum, and now under Danielle Smith with the Alberta Sovereignty Act and the new Alberta Next panel announced today, and likely more upcoming of her referendums. The efforts of the UCP have been designed to move us from somewhere over here towards the middle, towards more fairness. And again, I don't have the time to detail all of the efforts that are underway to move us towards fairness. But there is a problem, and I don't mean to downplay the efforts that have been made because they are significant and they are important. But the problem is that even if Ottawa gave us everything we want and everything that the Alberta government is asking for, we still wouldn't be here. We'd be maybe here. We just wouldn't be losing out as much as we used to. Just one example, instead of equalisation and federal transfers, the Alberta government is seeking an equal per capita transfer for various social programs. And when you say an equal per capita transfer, that sounds pretty fair. Every province gets an equal amount per capita. But you have to remember that Alberta pays more in. So if we pay more in and then we get an equal per capita amount back, we're still subsidizing the rest of the country. Not by as much as we are now, but we still would be subsidizing the rest of the country. And yet, for daring to even suggest that we move from here to here, we get called traitors. And we're attacked by the rest of the country, and they complain that we want special treatment. And that's the real crunch, because if Canada refuses to allow us to even move from there to here, never mind actually here to fairness, then what do? And that brings us to the question of separation. Now, separation is not on the line. It's not one of the positions on the line. Separation is stepping off the line entirely. And that's a big step. It's a step that many have already taken, many are close to being ready to, and some aren't. There's been some polls recently, I know polls, but the numbers have ranged from everything from 18% support for separation all the way up to 47%. So all we can really conclude from that is we really have no idea how popular it is yet. But putting aside percentages, I've been thinking about this, and I think it would be fair to say that Albertans roughly fit into 4 categories on this issue now. First, we've got people who understand the problem, they've given up on fixing it, and they're ready to leave. Second, there's people who understand the problem and are trying to fix it still, but who realize, or are maybe almost ready to realize, that it probably can't be fixed. Third, there's people who understand the problem and are trying to fix it and still think that it can be fixed. And then fourth, there's people who don't understand the problem. Because I really don't think there's anyone who understands the problem and doesn't want to fix it. Now, my job here today isn't to tell you which of those 4 categories you should fit into or where on the line would be fair. I'm just here to talk about the issues, suggest policy solutions, and try and make Alberta a better place. But I will make 2 observations. Those who don't want Alberta to separate should be working as hard as they possibly can to get fairness for Alberta and move us closer to the middle. Because the closer we get to the middle, the less likely it is that Albertans will want to separate. I'd go so far as to say we don't even need to get to here for most Albertans to be happy. But second, and perhaps a little counterintuitively, those who do want Alberta to separate should also be trying to get fairness for Alberta. And that's a little counterintuitive because yes, if those efforts succeed, it might make it a little harder to convince people to separate. But most of the things that would move Alberta closer to the middle aren't just good for Alberta, they're also things that Alberta would need to do before separating anyway. Things like setting up our own police force, our own pension plan, and taking over more provincial control of all sorts of different federal programs and systems. Plus, and I think this is really crucial, if you're right that Ottawa will never compromise and will never actually let us get fairness, then the more we try to fix things, the more Ottawa will say no, and the more that people who are still hoping that the problem can be fixed are likely to realize that it can't. So, in short, actually, whether you want to leave or not, or even if you're not sure, coincidentally or not, we're actually all on the same page for now in trying to pursue the same policies that will improve fairness for Alberta. And then I guess we'll have to see what Ottawa does. And that will really be, I think, what will decide this issue. So thank you for having me to speak. Please reach out to our Alberta Institute team if you have any questions on these or any other Alberta policy questions. And I look forward to chatting to you more afterwards. Thank you.
We sent our best people to Ottawa to fix the system, but the system could not be fixed.
They will beg to come sit at our table to negotiate a new deal.
And that is the way we're going to run the new Alberta.
Yet successive governments, blue or orange, have not done them.
About $1 billion a week on interest payments on the national debt.
It was inserted to bring about a technocratic overhaul of our government.
We're actually all on the same page for now in trying to pursue the same policies that will improve fairness for Alberta.
Responsibility isn't something you outsource.
And complete control of our own destiny here in Alberta.
They don't want to make change now, but they know that they can.
Alberta could be the new America.